modeling, object-oriented techniques. In this subject, we are going to understand about modeling. Why we model, why once we are going to develop the software, we need to create the model so that we can easily develop that software. So here we need to understand why we are going to model, what is the advantage of model, what are the types of system. There are so many things which we are going to discuss in this lecture. फर्स्ट सिस्टम मॉडलिंग क्या है, और सिस्टम एनालिसिस कैसे करते हैं, सिस्टम का डिज़ाइन कैसे करते हैं, एंड सो मेनी थिंग्स आर गोइंग टू कम इन दिस video lecture. So please listen me, it will be very interesting for you all. So the introduction, in this introduction part, the most of the methods used in the software development houses are based on functional and or data driven decomposition of the system. These approaches may be differ in many ways from the approaches taken by object oriented So as we were talking about to development of the software, here we need to understand the system development. The methods which we use in software development houses are based on the functional or the data driven decomposition of the system, and these approaches can be differ in many ways from the approaches taken by object oriented methods, where data and functions are highly integrated. Object oriented system development is a way to develop the software by building the self-contained modules or objects that can easily be replaced, modified and reused. It depicts the view of real world as a system of cooperative and collaborative objects. In this software is a collection of discrete objects that encapsulates data and operations performed on the data to model the real world objects. A class basically describes a group of objects having similar structure and similar operations. For example, I must tell you, if I talk about the class, what is class? So class is basically the group of objects which have the similar structure and similar operations. Fine. If I am talking about a house, it must have what? If I am talking about house is a class. It must have the address, house number, गली number, ठीक है, and pin code, then area, and then district. These are the some features, these are the some common things which must have in the house of a, if I am talking about house address of a class. Fine. हाउस नंबर, जहाँ पे आप रहते हैं वहाँ पे हाउस नंबर होगा. किसी गली में आप रहते हैं तो वो गली नंबर आप बताइए. पिन कोड एक एरिया जिसका आप एरिया से हम आइडेंटिफाई कर पाएँ कि किस एरिया में आपका हाउस है. देन एरिया इन द सेंस कि मान लीजिए एक डिस्ट्रिक्ट के अंदर कोई एरिया है तो आप उस एरिया को डिफाइन करें एंड देन डिस्ट्रिक्ट बताएं. तो दिस इज द बेसिक स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ ए क्लास विच कैन बी क्रिएटेड and we can have so many objects of this class as well. So object oriented philosophy is very much similar to the real world, hence is gaining popularity as the system here are seen as a set of interacting objects as in the real world. Fine. So to implement this concept, the process based structural programming is not used. Instead, objects are created using data structure, just as every programming language provides various data types and various variables of that type can be created. Similarly, in case of object certain, there are several object-oriented development methods around. In this chapter, the OMT will be discussed, and the methods by the Rambourg, etc. all can be modeling with extensions to model the classes, inheritance and behavior. So the objective of this chapter is to introduce the concept of modeling in general and to give an overview of object-oriented methodology. This chapter basically introduces OMT methodology and its three basic model ways, जिसको हम कहते हैं object model, dynamic model and functional model. So the concept of objects and class are discussed. Okay, So here we are going to talk about the modeling. What is modeling? Modeling क्या है and why it is essential for us to understand, to define a model and to develop a model. So the model is basically abstract of something for the purpose of understanding it before building it. Because the real system that we want to study are generally very complex. Because in order to understand the real system, we have to simplify the system. So a model is basically the abstraction that hides the non-essential characteristic of a system and highlights those characteristics which are pertinent to understand. मैं आपको एक छोटा सा एग्जांपल बताता हूँ. जब आप कोई फ्लैट खरीदने जाते हैं तो बिल्डर्स क्या करते हैं, एक सैंपल फ्लैट बना के रखते हैं जिसको हम मॉडल कहते हैं. बाय लुकिंग दैट मॉडल वी कैन इजीली अंडरस्टैंड दिस टाइप ऑफ थिंग्स वी विल get after purchasing it. Fine. So here that's the same way we are going to create the model. So the model is basically the abstraction which hides the non-essential characteristic of a system and highlights those characteristics which are pertinent to understand it. So Ephraim Turban describes a model as a simplified representation of reality. A model provides a means for conceptualization and communication of ideas in precise and unambiguous form. The characteristic of simplification and representation are difficult to achieve in the real world since they frequently contradicted to each other, and modeling enable us to cope with the complex of a system. Most modeling techniques used for analysis and design involve graphic languages. These graphic languages are made up of set of symbols. As you know, one small line is worth 1000 words. So the symbols are used according to the certain rules of methodology for communicating the complex relationship of information which more clearly than descriptive text. So modeling is used frequently during the many of the phases of the software life cycle such as analysis, design, implementation. So modeling, like any other object oriented development, is basically the iterative process. As the model progress from analysis to implementation, more details will be added to it. अब हम बात करते हैं कि why we do model. Why do we model? So before constructing anything, designer first build a model. So the main reason for constructing model includes to test a physical entity before actually building it. Fine. To set the stage for communication. So to test a physical entity before actually building it, to set the stage for communication between customers and the developers. Fine. For visualization, for finding the alternative representation, for reduction of complexity in order to understand. That are the some reasons we are developing the model. So object oriented methodologies, we live in the world of objects, and these objects exist in nature, in man-made entities, in business, and in the products that we use. Fine. They can be categorized, described, organized, combined, manipulated and created. So therefore an object oriented approach to the development of the software was proposed in late 1960. Fine. So object oriented methodology is a new system development approach which encouraging and facilitating reuse of software component. With this methodology, a computer system can be developed on the component basis, okay, with which enables the effective reuse of existing component and facilitates the sharing of its component by other system. By using object oriented methodologies, higher productivity, lower maintenance cost and better quality can be achieved. Object oriented methodology requires that object oriented techniques be used during the analysis, design and implementation of the system. This methodology makes the analyst to determine what the objects of the system are, how they behave over the time or in response of events. ठीक है, and what responsibilities and relationships an object has to other objects. Object oriented analysis has the analyst look at the objects in the system, their commonalities, differences and how the system needs to manipulate the objects. During design, overall architecture of the system is described. During implementation phase, the class objects and the interrelationship of these classes are translated and actually coded using the programming language. The databases can be created and the complete system is made operational. Fine. Now we understand object-oriented process. The object-oriented methodology for building system takes the object as a basis. For this, the system to be developed is observed and analyzed, and the requirements are defined. Once this is done, objects in the required system are identified. For example, in case of a banking system, a customer is an object, a ledger is an object, a passbook is an object, and even an account is an object. So, object-oriented methodology is somewhat similar to the traditional approach of the system design that it allows to follow a sequential process of system designing, but with a different approach. Fine. So, the basic step of system designing using object-oriented methodology may be the analysis. पहले हम system को analysis करें, उसको design करें, फिर object को design करें, and then we implement those. System analysis क्या होता है? As in other system development model, system analysis is the first phase of the object-oriented methodology too. In this phase, developer interacts with the user of the system to find out the user requirement and analyzes the system to understand the functioning of it. Based on this system study, the analyst prepare a model of the desired system. This model is purely based on what the system is required to do. At this stage, the implementation details are not taken and care of. Only the model of the system is prepared based on the idea that the system is made up of a set of interacting objects. The important element of the system are emphasized. Now we do talk about the system design. System design is the next development stage in object-oriented methodology, where the overall architecture of the system, of the desired system, is being decided. The system is organized as a set of subsystems interacting with each other. While designing the system as a set of interacting subsystems, the analyst takes care of specification as observed in systems analysis as well as what is required out of the new system by the end user. Fine. जैसे हम बात कर रहे थे ना कि बैंकिंग सिस्टम में क्या क्या चीज़ें हमारी ऑब्जेक्ट हैं, हमने देखा कि पासबुक भी हमारी एक ऑब्जेक्ट है, हमने देखा कि कस्टमर एक हमारा ऑब्जेक्ट है, अकाउंट हमारा एक ऑब्जेक्ट है. सो देयर आर सो मैनी थिंग्स विच कैन बी द ऑब्जेक्ट इन द सिस्टम. सो वी नीड टू एनालाइज. हम पहले एनालिसिस करते हैं कि चीज़ें हमें क्या चाहिए, what we require and how it helps to the customer easily. So in analysis, we do not talk about how it is going to implement. We just analyze what we require to implement a system. Then the next phase we do the system design. System design जो है next development stage होता है ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड मैथडोलॉजी में, जहाँ पे आर्किटेक्चर ऑफ द डिजायर्ड सिस्टम हम डिसाइड करते हैं एंड द सिस्टम इज ऑर्गेनाइज्ड एज ए सब सिस्टम इंटरेक्टिंग विद ईच अदर. ऐसा नहीं है कि हमने एक सिस्टम लिया और उसको पूरे को डिज़ाइन कर दिया. हमने क्या किया, सिस्टम बनाया, एक सिस्टम लिया, उसमें हमने सिस्टम्स के सब सिस्टम्स बना दिए और इन सब सिस्टम्स को आपस में कोलैबोरेट कर दिया. फाइन. एंड दे कैन इंटरेक्टिंग विद ईच अदर टू. Fine. So the system analysis is to perceive the system as a set of interacting objects. A bigger system may also be seen as a set of interacting smaller subsystems that in turn are composed of set of interacting objects. While designing the system, the stress lies on the objects comprising the system and not on the process being carried out in the system. ऑब्जेक्ट डिजाइन क्या है, अब हम ऑब्जेक्ट कैसे डिजाइन करेंगे. द सिस्टम एनालिसिस इज टू परसीव द सिस्टम एज ए सेट ऑफ इंटरेक्टिंग ऑब्जेक्ट्स. अ बिगर सिस्टम में ऑल्सो सीन एज ए सेट ऑफ इंटरेक्टिंग स्मॉलर सब सिस्टम दैट इन टर्न आर कंपोज्ड of a set of interacting objects while designing the system. The stress lies on the objects comprising the system and not on the process which is being carried out the system. Now we talk about the object design. In this phase, the detail of the system analysis and design are implemented. Objects identified in the system design phase are designed. Here, the implementation of these objects is decided in the form of data structure required and the interrelationship between the object. For example, we can define a data type called customer and then create and use several objects of this data type. This concept is known as creating the class. So, in this phase of the development process, the designer also decides about the classes in the system based on these concepts. Hence, he decides on the whether the classes needs to be created from the scratch or any existing class can be used as it is or new classes can be inherited from them too. Fine. Implementation में हम क्या करते हैं? During the phase, classes, objects and the interrelationship of these classes are translated and actually coded by using an object-oriented programming language, and the required database are created and the complete system is transformed into the operational one. Advantage क्या है object oriented methodology के? As compared to the conventional system development techniques, object oriented methodology provides many benefits. Right? So, the system designed using object oriented methodology are closer to the real world, as the real world functioning of the system is directly mapped into the system. Fine. Because of this, it becomes easier to produce and understand the design. Fine. The object of the systems are immune to requirement changes because of data hiding and encapsulation. Fine. Features of object orientation. So, the encapsulation means a technique which allows the programmer to hide the internal functioning of the object from the user of the object. Encapsulation separates the internal functioning of the object from the external functioning, thus providing the user flexibility to change the external behavior of the object, making the programmer code safe against the changes made by the user. Object-oriented methodology design encourage more reusability. The classes once defined can easily be used by the other applications. So, एक क्लास को हम दूसरे सिस्टम में भी यूज कर सकते हैं अगर हमारी कोई क्लास जनरल है तो. फाइन. The classes once defined can easily be used by other applications. It is achieved by defining classes and putting them into a library of classes where all the classes are maintained for future use. Whenever a new class is needed, the programmer first looks into the library of the class, and if it is available, it can be used as it is or with some modifications, and this reduces the development cost and time and increase the quality. Fine. Another way of reusability is provided by the inheritance features of the object orientation. The concept of object inheritance allows the programmer to use the existing class in the new applications by making small changes or additions to the existing class can quickly create new classes. This provides all the benefit of reusability discussed in the previous points. So, as a programmer has to spend less time and effort, so he can utilize saved time in concentrating on the other aspect of the system. Fine. तो बहुत सारे एडवांटेज आपको मिलेंगे अगर आपके पास पहले से ही कुछ क्लासेस बनी हुई हैं, आप उसमें थोड़ा सा मॉडिफिकेशन करके उनको अदर्स यूज कर सकते हैं. Object-oriented methodology approach is more natural as it deals with the real-world objects, so it provides nice structure for thinking and abstracting and leads to the modular design. So, many object-oriented methodologies have been developed since its inception. Some of the popular methodologies are like Boost methodology, which was developed in 1994. He developed the object-oriented analysis and object-oriented design concepts. RDD methodology, Wurzbach, Wickerson and Wiener developed responsibility driven design, which we known as RDD methodology. OMT methodology, which came in 1991, was proposed by the James Rambaugh, which led a team at the research labs of the General Electric to develop the object-oriented methodology modeling techniques. Object-oriented system OOSE, which has been designed by Ivar Jacobson, developed the object-oriented software engineering. Fine. So the object-oriented methodologies that have been around in the world are these have been proposed some. So, the discussion of these methodologies beyond the scope of this course. So, we stop this discussion about different types of methodology. Now, OMT methodology की बात हम कर रहे हैं. So, the OMT methodology is an object-oriented software development methodology which was given by the James Rambaugh, and this methodology describes a method for analysis, design and implementation of a system using object-oriented techniques. It is a fast, intuitive approach for identifying and modeling all the objects making a system. The OMT consists of three related but different viewpoints, each capturing important aspect of the system, i.e. the static, dynamic and functional behavior of the system. These are described by the object model, dynamic model and functional model of the OMT methodology. The object model describes the static, structural and data aspect of a system. The dynamic model describes the temporal, behavioral and control aspect of a system. The functional model describes the transformational and functional aspect of a system. So, every system has these three aspects. So, each model describes one aspect of the system but contains reference to the other model. The entire OMT software development process has four phases: analysis, system design, object design and implementation of the software. Fine. So, most of the modeling is performed in the analysis phase. In this phase, three basic models, object model, dynamic model and functional model are developed, while the object model is most important as it describes the basic element of the system. The objects, okay, all the three models together combined together describes the complete functional system. The object model describes the object in the system and their interrelationship. This model observes all the objects as static and does not pay any attention to their dynamic nature. The dynamic model depicts the dynamic aspect of the system. It portrays the changes occurring in the state of the various objects with the events that might occur in the system. Functional model basically describes the data transformation of the system. This describes the flow of data and the changes that occur in the data throughout the system. So, we are going to discuss object model in detail and remaining model will be described in the coming videos. Fine. So, we are going to discuss about the object model. So, the object model describes the structure of the object in the system, their identity, their relationship to the other objects, their attributes and their operations. The object model depicts the primary view of how the real world in which the system interact is divided and the overall decomposition of the system. The object model provides the framework in which the other models are placed. Object model is represented graphically with an object diagram. The object diagram contains classes interconnected by association lines. Each class represents a set of individuals. The association line establish relationship among classes. Each association line represents a set of links from the object of one class to the object of another class. Now, we discuss the concept of objects, class and relationship between object and or classes. We also introduce the notations and the symbols of the OMT used for object, class and relationship. So, we are going to discuss about object and class. A class describes a collection of similar objects. It's basically a template, as we have shown you the example with the example of the house. It must contains address, area, phone number, gully number, pin codes, and so many things can be included in that. It was an example, so you can create the different values into that, and you can use it into your system. Fine. So the class describes a collection of similar objects. It is a template where certain basic characteristics of set of objects are defined. Class defines the basic attribute and the operation of the object of that type. Defining a class does not define any object, but it only creates a template. So for objects to be actually created, instance of the class are to be created as per the requirement of the case. So we stop the things here. We will discuss more about the object and class in the next video. Stay with us.